In 1938, in a dimly lit room, a girl stared into a mirror at midnight, saw a stranger face, and months later, she died of what was said to be a shock attack. If that sounds a bit like what happened in Persona 4 with the Midnight Channel, then you're not wrong, except that it's real. And in today's video, I'm going to tell you all about different real-world origins of the Midnight Channel, starting from the director's light-hearted interview all the way to the dark terrors of the urban legend. Let's first recall how it all started and capture important elements about the Midnight Channels, because while many people remember the final reveal, many forget how it all begins. We first heard of the Midnight Channel as a form of rumor going around Yasogami High.
You ever hear of the Midnight Channel? You're supposed to look into a TV that's switched off, alone, exactly at midnight on a rainy night, while you're staring at your own image, alone. Another person will appear on the screen, and they say that person's your soulmate.
What?
That said, around the same time, Inaba is also dealing with an actual murder case. And after more of the story is unfold, the cast work out that instead of a soulmate, the Midnight Channel is actually showing the next person to get caught up in that case. For days, the image of the screen is nothing but heavy static, but every night it gets a little clearer. And once the image is fully clear, the person has gone missing, and if nobody finds them in time, they will turn up dead. That's what the Midnight Channel originally was, a soulmate ritual rumor that turns out to be a countdown system that linked to the ongoing murder mystery. When it's come to the direct answer to how the Midnight Channel was created, we don't have to look too far. Sitting in the never translated to English official book called Persona Club Book P4 was an interview with the director Katsura Hashino. Hashino explained that he wanted to make an RPG built around the murder mystery, and that he always loved the kind of story where someone from the big city visits a small town and during their stay solve whatever's going on there. However, there's a problem. A murder in a small town, Hashino says, casts a very dark, gloomy shadows, so he wanted something to counterbalance that. So he came up with the ideas to present the games like a Japanese TV variety shows. The kind where a celebrity visits a location and does some stupid silly report according to him. And this is the starting point of how the Midnight Channel was created. That said, not long after, there was another problem. And this one exists since the Persona 3 days. Hashino then go on to explain that one big challenge the team faced was tying the real world setting to the Persona battling fantasy side of the game. Take Persona 3 for example. Tartarus was pretty much just a training location in the beginning and barely connected to the story until later. So for Persona 4, the team wanted to fix that by writing the story about someone who gets kidnapped into a mysterious world, which resulting in the disappearance and rescue portion elements of the Midnight Channel. Okay, so we learned a lot so far, but the next part is my favorite as Hashino explains his idea behind the game's biggest theme. He said that to find our path in the world and understand it, we have to take in accurate information. And the real theme he wanted to explore in Persona 4 was the mindset a person needs to have to tell correct information from the wrong one. That's what led to the fog motif that obstruct the clear vision that we see. And now that I think about it, the Midnight Channel's own statics also carry the very same idea. Apart from the static image of the TV, there's also a distortion effects that the Midnight Channels created, which also happen to line up with other points Hashino makes. I don't like it, he say, when the media portray things in an inflammatory way that stokes the fears and anxieties of the viewers. When you're taking in information from a third party, you got to always be aware of that third party interest and aims, but that leaves you not knowing what you can trust. In that situation, I think if we rely on the most granular units of humanities, that is our family, friends, and communities, and put our trust in those interactions, then even when the media goes and stirs up our anxieties and fears, a reassuring words from our people, "You're okay," can save us. Now you know exactly how the Midnight Channel came to be. That said, there's still much more for us to explore. Do you remember the actual rumor the students told each others? Stare into a blank TV at midnight when you are alone, and the face of your soulmates will appear. Apparently, a lot of elements of this rumor happens to exist in the real world. Let's start with the mechanism itself. Stare at your own reflections long enough and another face really does show up. Italian psychologist Giovanni Caputo documented the effects formally in 2010. The setup: sit someone in the dim room, lit by the single lamp behind them, facing a mirror, and have them just stare at their own reflection. In under a minute, most people stop seeing their own face. Across 50 participants, 66% reported huge deformation of their own face. 28% saw a completely unfamiliar person, 48% saw something monstrous, and 18% saw an animal face instead. I don't know about that one. That last one's pretty weird. Now, when it's come to the soulmate portion specifically, there is also a documented ritual recorded independently across multiple countries and centuries. To perform this ritual, you have to be alone in a dark room. When the clock strikes midnight, you peel an apple in front of the mirror, and your future husband or wife face is supposed to appear, looking over your shoulders. Ireland's Folklore Commission actually collected first-hand accounts of it back in 1938, including one from County Sligo, where a girl performed it, saw a man face in the mirrors, and months later, allegedly, met that exact man in real life. However, she fainted on the spot and died of shock within 3 months. And this ritual is also the actual historical ancestor of Bloody Mary as it plays today. Now, when it comes to Japan, it's actually also have its own version of someone else looking back at your ritual. However, this time, it's not about romance. In Japan, there's a documented superstition called Awase Kagami. This is a ritual where you face 2 mirrors toward each other at midnight and stare into them. And depending who you ask, you might see your own dead face, a completely different reflection staring back, or you might even actually summon a devil, apparently. In 1784, a real Edo period text also recorded a named yokai for this exact scenario on Geikyo, a haunted mirror where anyone who gets into it might see a transformed monstrous version of themselves looking back. So we covered the soulmate half of the Midnight Channel. Now we left with the disappearance and the turning up dead parts. And well, turns out that part has its own trace to the real world as well. Through the late 1980s and into the 90s, Japanese television was genuinely saturated with something called Shinrei session and Shinrei video programming. Supposedly, these are real-world footage of ghosts and figures showing up in TV statics, photographs, and home video. The era's most famous product was a story about a cursed videotape that killed whoever watched it. You know, you might heard about this one. I think it's called The Ring or something like that. That said, the genre popularity didn't stop at just a novel and a theme. In the late 1990s, a creator known as Otoro puts out an unclosable flash pop-up animation reading, "Do you like the Red Room?" Refused to close it, and eventually the screen turned red and showed a list of names. You're included. It picked up real national notoriety in 2004 when the browser bookmark of an 11-year-old involved in the Sasebo stabbing case turned out to include this very animation. Now, among the story and legend just mentioned, one of them stand out because it sounds suspiciously like the Midnight Channel. It's called the NNN Spatial Broadcast. Tracing back to an anonymous post on 2chan around November 2000. The story goes sometime between 2 and 4 a.m. After normal programming ends, a late night viewer finds nothing but static, then color bars, then grainy black and white footage of what looked like a junkyard or industrial site. A flat monotone voice then read out a list of names and ages, and the broadcast ends the same way every time, by showing a message that spells out, "These are the victims for tomorrow. Good night." In one version of the story though, your name also happened to be included.
What?
That said, the name NNN also isn't random. It came straight from the Nippon News Network's Japan Actual News Broadcast Consortiums, which gives the fake broadcast a skins of a real emergency alerts. And to add more to it, the format of a list of names being read out after a disaster also has a real precedence. After the 1985 Japan Airline Flight 123 crash, which Japanese news looped all 520 victims' names for days. There's also a 2009 account from someone claiming to have actually seen something close to this on late night analog TV. They saw footage of Yamenoshima, Tokyo Landfill Island, followed by a slow scrolling list of names labeled emergency broadcast. In the beginning, they assumed it meant a plane has gone down and went to sleep. However, no crash was reported on the news the next morning. According to some thread, regional Japanese stations likely really did sign off some night with slowly created scroll of staff name, set to classical music over a shot of dark TV tower, ending with a narrator saying good night, then static, then color bars, which really result in blending reality and this urban legend together.